Let's now talk about transcription of conversation, which may be an important stage and at the same time may be a challenging task in any pragmatic analysis. Conventional transcriptions of conversations usually used for pragmatic analysis use some kind of orthographic script rather than any phonemic transcription. Phonemic transcription relies on the transcription of sounds with some kind of sound symbols, whereas orthographic transcription is based on words. They show how items and your are written in some established written norm. You might expect to indicate hesitation when you are transcribing somebody's interview. We need to transcribe data, and this is more relevant in our pragmatic analysis, because in pragmatic analysis we most of the time use natural language conversations between two or more participants, and for that matter there will be so many elements which are less linguistic, or some people might call them extra linguistic. For example, some kind of hesitations, some kinds of ums and ers in your talk, and these ums and ers may be relevant in some kind of pragmatic situation, and they might have meanings. For example, a speaker might use these ums and ers when he's unclear about certain thing, when he wants to hide something, or when he's confused about something. So all these situations and ums and ers in these situations, they do have certain meanings. So whenever you are analyzing natural language in a real life situation, you need to transcribe all these aspects, which are obviously vocal in their nature, but they might be extra linguistic features. And only when you transcribe them, they would help you in understanding the meaning in the real situation. Moving forward, we can see there could be some other fillers and uptake signals like yeah, and some other audible breathing and indrawn breath. They can also be transcribed, and there are established symbols for all this. Let me just share with you that all established academic disciplines and academic words, they have their own ways, they got their own established patterns of transcribing data. So we also in Pakistan draw from all established disciplines, and we use the same symbols. So symbols in front of you for breathing or in-draw breath, they're there. So we have symbols for most of the things. They might vary from culture to culture. There might be small variations, but we got symbols. So I would just share that what things we need to transcribe carefully and what kind of possible symbols are with us. Our more difficult issue in this regard is whether and how to represent intonation and pitch, the stress of certain words or a complete sentence in a kind of discourse or text. It becomes very difficult to decide about whether something is being emphasized upon, is being stressed upon, or not. And once you decide it, how to mark it in transcription. One of the possible options is to mark such things with capital letters. A word in a sentence which is being emphasized upon through intonation or through pitch variation, you might mark it with the capital words, with the capital letters. So this becomes distinctive, and you could later on recognize it as an emphasized upon word when you want to interpret the data. There are many other important features of conversational sequences, how a conversation is built on, that constitutes conversational sequences. So there are other elements of these sequences which needs to be transcribed when you are writing down a data, a spoken data. For instance, you will always need to mark pauses in a talk. Pauses, especially in a real life talk, are very important. I just gave you one example here. A long pause may be interpreted as a silence, and we all know that silence has meaning. For example, and silence has different meanings in different cultures. In some cultures, if you are in the middle of an argument, silence might be considered as a symbol of, or as a token for agreement to a certain argument which is being raised. And in some contexts or situations, this may be taken as a symbol for a disagreement or your anger. So it might be interpreted differently in different cultures. And therefore, it's very important to mark pauses in transcription, so that looking into the situation later on, you could understand or interpret their meanings. Widely used convention in this regard is using parentheses or brackets in general language, with the length of pause indicated in tens of seconds. For example, if you see a pause of 2 minutes and a half, you would probably write it down as 2.5 within parentheses. So the duration of pause is usually shown especially when the pauses are longer ones. When we have short pauses, they might be indicated with some kind of parentheses and dots in between them. For example, when there is a one syllable pause, it may be interpreted, or it may be shown with one dot within the parentheses. When there is a two syllable pause, it may be interpreted or shown as two dots in a parenthesis. Another sequencing phenomena which is very important to be marked is the overlap. When two speakers or more than two speakers speak simultaneously and cross each other's talk, we call this overlap in Pragmatics. This overlap is shown by a double slash which is in front of you at the bottom of your screen, and this slash is usually written at the start of an overlap, right, and not at the end. At the end, what we do is, at the end of an overlap, we write down an aesthetic impression, and this could be written down at the end of the words of all participants in an overlap, or if there are two participants, at the end of the words they said simultaneously. An alternative to this in some context is the use of brackets, the long brackets. You may also want to indicate an important non-linguistic feature. There could be other aspects of a conversation which are not linguistic, and they may be useful for interpreting the data. You can still encode them or mark them through certain measures. For example, they may be done by a certain square or angled brackets. In a little talk in front of you, including two participants, you can say, John, one of the participants, say, yeah, somebody with a cheese toasty machine. And the Susie, in response to this statements, laughs and says, yeah, she laughs. And laughing here is significant to interpret the meanings of the overall conversation. So you could write it down within brackets. Although there are relatively widely agreed conventions, but there could possibly be certain minor variation between various educational or research contexts. So whenever you went on to transcribe a certain text, you need to know the conventions which are being used in your area of investigation and within your own academic world.